Hi everyone, and welcome to Overcoming Communication Barriers. So my name is Lisa Patti, and my company is called AccentC3, and I work with international professionals from all over the world, and I work on communication. So today we're going to learn some tips to help you overcome some communication challenges that we all might face, especially now that we're working on digital. And most recently, I've begun to collaborate with Imitation. So if you'd like to follow up after this webinar, you can log on to imitation.com and you can type in your information and wait for further instructions. We might even have a chance to connect afterwards with questions, or maybe we can meet. So that would be a great tool for us if you have questions later. So a little bit about me. I am based in New York City, and as I said, I specialize in working with international professionals from all over the world. I work on voice and tone. I work on accent. I work on delivery. I work on, answering questions. So whatever it is someone might need, we work on and design programs for them. Now, how I got into this is my background is originally in speech pathology, and I use that as a platform or the science behind what I do. And then I began to study intercultural communication, which fascinated me because culture has such a huge impact on how we deliver. And it could be from different parts of the US, it could be from different parts of the world, from different regions. Culture does impact our beliefs around communication. So that's something I'm going to ask you to think about as we go through this webinar today. We are going to be switching between the deck and myself. So when I move to the deck, unfortunately, there's no great way to do this. So both myself and the deck can be on. So I am going to switch over to the deck in a few minutes, and you're going to hear me going through some of it, and I'm going to come back and forth to engage with you. So I am going to move over to the deck right now and talk a little bit about what you'll walk away with today. So today, I want you to start to think about, I want you to raise your awareness to your own communication style. Now, what do I mean by that is how you like to communicate, how you want to be viewed, how you want to be perceived. And I want you to start to think about this. I'm also going to talk about speakers' nerves and just stress in general. We live in a very stressful time right now. And unfortunately, that can impact us. Just the climate of the world is a little bit intense. So those things can affect our voice. It could affect the way we communicate it. It could affect our thoughts and how clear they are. So that's very important for us to focus on. We're going to make sure that we talk about keeping brief and the power of the pause. And also you're going to learn some elements to use your voice more powerfully. So as we move along, I want you to start thinking about yourself in all this and how you can use it in your everyday life. So the first thing I want everyone to think about, and I want you to think about this whether you're in a meeting or whether you're presenting or whether you're on Zoom or whether you're in a one-to-one conversation. How do you want to be perceived as a speaker? Do you want to be perceived as confident, calm, commanding? It could be assertive. It could be educational. Think of how you want to be perceived as a speaker. And why? And that's very important because when you get up there, you want to think about, is all the things that I'm doing lining up with how I want to be perceived? Sometimes we want to be perceived in a certain way, but we don't necessarily use our voices or our facial expressions to do that. Many years ago, a professor named Albert Mehrabian. Now, I'm not sure if he was a professor or a researcher in this area, so I apologize, don't quote me on that one, but he came up with some famous research. It was a bit controversial in the sense where some people will say, okay, I don't know if this is definitely true, but you might have heard of this. It's, people remember. Now, this is what people remember. 55% of what people remember about what we say, about how we communicate, is visual. So our facial expressions, our gestures, our body language. 38% is vocal, so how our voice sounds, how it connects. And only 7%, if you could believe it, 7% is the words we say. So when you're thinking about connecting with someone, when you're thinking about presenting, think about all the things we need to do, whether it's on Zoom, and we do need facial expressions and body language on Zoom or on any video platform when we're connecting, because if you don't have that engagement, it's going to be much harder for the listener to remember the words. So let's think about now when we network, when we are communicating with each other, let's say on imitation. Imitation is a tool for us to connect, but when we're connecting, there are some things that could sabotage our communication a little bit, and it could make us less effective as a communicator. One of those things is what we said before, stress. Stress is what we're going through a lot. So there's a quote that I saw from Matt Abrams, and he's from the Stanford Business School. And it said, research tells us that 85% of people feel nervous in high-stakes speaking situations. And quite frankly, I think the other 15% are lying. And that's just to highlight. This is someone who's, out of Stanford Business School, and we all care about whether it's just because we're a perfectionist, because we maybe get a little nervous before we speak. It's normal. It's very, very normal because we care about what we put out there. And for some of us, it might be a little more stressful than others. So what I'm going to do right now is just talk a little bit about how to prepare yourself for those situations before we even get on camera or on stage. And hopefully we'll be doing that again very, very soon. So what happens when you get nervous? Now, as I said, this is something that happens to most of us, and this very old part of our brain, the part of the brain that is responsible for fight or flight, is called the sympathetic nervous system. Now, the sympathetic nervous system kicks in and it tells our body, oh my gosh, we're in trouble, we have to go, there's a lion chasing us, we're in danger, things need to move faster, I need to talk faster, breathe faster. And what happens when we're up on stage or even at a meeting that is really important to us, things start to move quick. So what we need to do is trick our body, trick that parasympathetic, which is the part of the brain that helps us calm down. And they call it rest and digest. It's that part of the brain where you feel safe. It's the sitting on your couch, feeling. It's the sitting with rest and digest, that feeling after a great meal when you just feel really calm. We want to bring ourselves to a little bit more of that. Now, one thing to note though, and again, this is something that's really important. We want to use some of those speaker's nerves to give us energy during a presentation. So that's something that we can target. We can use those speaker's nerves to give us some energy. Now, I'm going to show you this slide and then I'm going to come back on the screen so I could just demonstrate this. So the first thing I want you to do, and this is actually just an easy way to slow the system down, and it's a way to trick the brain, is you're going to take a little breath in, where you're going to breathe in, through the nose, and then you're going to breathe out of your mouth, but on the sound S. So you're going to have this prolonged breath. And when you have a slow, long breath out, it calms the system down. So I am going to switch over so I can show you. Hello. Okay, so I want you to breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. And it's actually very relaxing to do. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. And it slows the system down. Again, what we want to do by speaking slower, by letting the system slow down. We want to get the brain thinking everything's great, everything is fine. I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint. The next thing is know your style. So do you really need to slow it down before a presentation, or do you need to get hyped up? Are you someone who needs to listen to fast music and get yourself charged up? The other thing I would suggest you do, if you need some proof to prove it to yourself that you're doing really well, start making a list of all the times you did an excellent presentation and use it as proof. Instead of just telling yourself, hey, I did great, I could do this, prove it to yourself. And this is a way of, again, making the brain understand that you've done it once, you could do it again. So, sorry, we're going to move along. The next thing we're going to talk about is your vocal presence. Now, as I made mention of before, culture and voice are very closely related. So depending on where you come from in the world is going to tell you a little bit how you use volume, how you use variations in pitch. So, for English speakers, especially from the States, we use a lot of variations in our voice. There's a lot of raises and falls. There's a lot of pitch variation, and we want that. The brain likes variation. It likes to change it up. Sometimes there's a tone difference, how people deliver, how direct they are, how many words you use. If you come from a language background where there's just a lot more vocabulary, that's going to affect how you're speaking, especially if you're using English as a second language, or if you're using different languages. You want to know how your language backgrounds affect the next language you're speaking, just because it's the influence of different styles that you have. So understanding those about yourself is really important. The next thing you want to start to think about is your own vocal presence. And when I talk about vocal presence, I always tell people you want to think about your voice as part of your brand. So one thing that you're hearing right now is my voice. You're not seeing me very much. I'm just coming in and out of the screen, but you are hearing my voice. And more, we're doing this. You're on a Zoom call and people shut their videos, but what do you hear? You hear the sound of their voice. Now, if somebody's mumbling or speaking very quickly, or maybe very, very flat, where they're very monotone and they're talking like this the whole time, or if they're very soft and you can barely hear them, that's actually going to be very hard to engage someone. And you want to think about, am I doing this? Am I, having a conversation? Am I delivering in a way that, I might lose my listener? We are living in a world where it's very easy to lose your listener because there's many, many distractions. So whether it's a phone or, now that people are working from home, they have kids and pets, you want to engage them. You don't want to give them extra reasons to get distracted. One of the things that you could try to practice is, and what I usually tell people I coach, is write out a few lines of what you might say in a presentation, or even just take a paragraph and emphasize the keywords. Now, how are you doing this? Through pitch. You come up slightly in pitch instead of just using volume. I'd really like to go would be volume. I'd really like to go would be pitch. So coming up slightly in pitch. I'd really like to go. I'm going to switch over for 1 second just to show you that. Okay, so as I was saying, vary your pitch. If you want to come up in pitch just slightly, it's almost as if you're putting your voice on different notes. As you vary it up, the brain likes that and it engages your listener. You want to be careful not to be, this is where we were talking about being monotone, not being monotone. You want to think about, even there's some tools out there that I just recently found out about that transcribe your speech. So maybe you can try to record yourself and then put it through, one of them was Trint.com, put it through one of these transcription tools and look at the text and see, how was my word flow? Did I choose the words I wanted to? Another thing you want to think about is, are you clear? Are you someone who's mumbling, or are you shaping your words? The other thing is you could also vary up your volume. If you are a soft speaker, or if you're a very loud speaker, vary it up. Now, you don't want to be too much to the listener. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next section, but I just wanted to check in with you and again, make sure that you understand how important it is that your voice is part of your brand. So I'm going to move to the next slide, and here we go. One way to help you pace yourself, and it gives you a lot of power, is inserting pauses. Inserting pauses between thoughts, using pauses in place of fillers. Those, if you're someone who does a lot of that as you're thinking, this is where you're going to help yourself. So I want you to practice, and I don't ever want you to practice this in high stakes conversations, but use a pause. Use a pause so that you can be more powerful. Use a pause in place of fillers or to take a breath. Many, many people, when they speak, will speak right through to the end of their sentence, and they keep going and going and going, and they never take a breath. So using very carefully placed pauses in between thoughts, longer pauses when you want to frame ideas, shorter pauses just to take a breath is going to be very important. It's also going to help you pace yourself. So remember when we talked about stress and how anxiety plays out, one of the ways anxiety plays out in your voice and communication is when you're talking too fast. If you're inserting those pauses, it's very easy for you to slow that pace down. So another thing pausing does is gives your audience a chance to absorb the information. If you are talking too fast and you are talking to a group, you're teaching, you're training, you're explaining a new concept, you're talking about last year's numbers, you're presenting something to your class, then you need to insert those pauses so people remember. You know, you're up there so people can remember what you're saying. So going back, we're thinking about slowing ourselves down. We're thinking about the pace of our voice, the sound of our voice. Are we monotone? Are we using different pitches? And are we using pausing? And this is something you can practice really easily. You could even take a text, just like I was saying before, and mark the text with little slashes to tell you it's time to pause, and practice that. Record yourself. Recording is the best way for you to get to know yourself. The next thing we're going to talk about is being concise. Now, this is really important. If you are saying a lot and you're overwhelming your listener, it's really important for you to start thinking about, am I someone who needs to break things down a little bit? One way to do this, so I do coach a lot of people in the startup world, and one thing that happens is they have a great pitch, but then they get up for Q&A, and what happens is they just talk and talk and talk. And they don't realize what they're doing, but they just don't get to that answer. And that's actually going to hurt them because it doesn't give them a chance to answer other questions that might come up, but it also doesn't really leave the audience with a clear answer. There's just too much information. So what we need to do is get you to practice this. First of all, how long does it really take you to answer something? I want you to set a timer the next time you get on a call and start thinking about, you know, when I give an answer, how long does it actually take me to give that answer? Is it a minute? Is it 2 minutes? And then start to feel it. You know, I'm going to speak for a minute and see how much I can get out. How long does a minute really take? And I know that's a strange way of framing it, but when you think about a minute, when you think, okay, I only have a minute to say this, I have 3 minutes to really deliver this, it goes a lot faster than you think. And when you are speaking, you want to make sure that you can get this information in there in a short amount of time. Another thing that you want to do if you're on video calls or even if you're in a meeting is make sure that you're inserting questions in there. If you're someone who does give very long explanations, one way to check in with your audience so you're making sure you're not losing them is to ask questions. And it's not just is everybody with me? Do you understand? You know, you want to ask the types of questions that gets the audience talking as well. Now, if it's a small group, then it's much easier to do this because you can ask questions like, okay, so in your experience, you know, how does this work for you? And then get them talking. Maybe you're talking about something you're training them on. Maybe you're training them on a new platform or a new tool or a new app. You know, get them talking and get them talking about their experiences so you can check yourself, but also take the temperature of the audience, which is really important. As you practice this, you're going to see how your style can smooth out. Again, going back to, you know, how do I want to be portrayed? How do I want to be perceived? You know, when you have command of the things that you say, when you're more clear, when you can be more concise, people are going to walk away knowing a lot more of what you wanted them to know. What are your key points to deliver? So when I help my clients prepare, what I usually tell them is, okay, when I'm going to lay out the information, I think it's really important for you to just lay out the key points. Am I hitting these 3 key points, or am I going way past them? As I lay out my key points, bullet point out what you want to talk about. Make sure that you can talk about them in a way that's clear to everyone. So another thing you want to stay away from is using too much jargon. If you're using very technical language all the time and you have a mixed audience, then it's going to be really difficult for your audience to engage with you. And I think that that's something that we all do. We're all a little guilty of this because, we have specialty areas. We're really good at it. If we're someone who's really good at tech, or someone who's really good at marketing, or if you're a student and you're really passionate about a subject, you might get into the vocabulary of that subject. Just know that you have a big, wide range of listeners out there. And, people have said, pitch it to as if you're pitching it to a 4-year-old, or explain it as if you're explaining it to a 4-year-old. So that's something that you want to start to think about when you're explaining yourself. Now, again, we're matching how we can calm the system down with the sound of our voice and how we're delivering. Are we delivering quickly? Are we delivering too slow? And then, are we giving the audience the key points that we want them to take away? Something that can support this, something that actually helps, is when you give client examples. So, for example, when I was talking about volume, something that's actually, something that makes me think about culture and volume is when I was coaching a French speaker, is a female, and she was very adamant about not using her voice in a certain way because she felt like it was not feminine. And she didn't want to get too loud. She didn't want to use too much variation. And she also just didn't like the sound of the variations. She felt like it wasn't natural to her. And again, this is something that, when you're dealing with people from all around the world, and when you're communicating, as we're communicating more and more, adding stories in, for examples, are going to be very helpful to you to explain to your audience, how something might look. Now, this person that I was just talking about was someone who, went through all these steps and actually developed her own style and was able to be flexible. And this is something I want you to think about as well. When you're delivering to different audiences, there's no right or wrong, but you want to be able to be flexible. If you need to be really technical, go ahead, be really technical when it's needed in those technical groups. But then know you have to be very flexible, and flexible enough where when you're talking to a different type of a group, when you're talking to a mixed group, you can deliver with some facts, some data, but put it in a language that is going to be easier to understand. Names, numbers, important information, that should stand out. And how does that stand out? You could use your voice, you could use pitch. 24%. We went up 24% last year. 10 times the amount. And you want to stress those numbers. You want those numbers to stand out. So when you're delivering complex ideas, when you're delivering your information, when you want things to be more concise, certain things should stand out. Now, how do you practice all this? In the quickest explanation possible, you're going to try to practice little bits at a time. So what I tell my clients is, you should practice one goal at a time, and you should have quick practices several times a day instead of one long practice. So it's really important for you to develop a habit change here. And it's just like going to the gym, right? You go to the gym, and if you go to the gym for 2 hours in one day, it's not going to be so successful for you because you didn't go to the gym then for the next 2 weeks, and you're just sore. But if you go to the gym for 10 minutes each day, and you just do a little bit of exercise, your body starts to change and your muscles become accustomed to it. So what we want to start to do is develop some muscle memory here. We want to develop muscle memory for relaxation. We want to develop muscle memory for variations in pitch and how we use our voice. If we're someone who needs to be more clear, then how we're shaping those sounds. And if we need to be more concise, we want to develop those habits. Practice them a few times a day in just a few minutes a day, And the more you practice, the better you will get at this. And again, going back to recording, you are going to need to record, because you need to know on, if you want on video, on audio recording, how do you sound? And how quickly do you go? How slow do you go? Are you engaging? So I want you to think about what your goals are. And I know we just went through a lot in a very short amount of time, but I wanted to give you just some highlights. Now, each of those topics can be talked about in depth. They're their own workshops, and we can talk about them extensively. If you'd like to ask more questions on imitation.com, I'd be happy to go over them. But just think about what you personally can use the most and see what you can walk away with. Here's an interesting quote that I often talk about by Maya Angelou. People don't always remember what you say or even what you do, but they always remember how you made them feel. So if you can make them feel heard, if you can use emotion in your voice, if you can give them the information and they feel like you really gave it to them, they're going to appreciate that. This is my contact information. Please feel free to link in with me on LinkedIn. Send me an email if you have questions. And I'm going to switch back right now so I can say our final goodbyes. So I hope that you got something out of this very quick presentation, that you can think about calming yourself down before you present, that you think about the sound of your voice and how you're using it, how clear you are, how you're shaping sounds, how you're moving pitch, and how concise the language is when you deliver it, so that everyone can take a little bit away. So if you have questions, like I said, I would love to hear what you have to say. And you can feel free to get in touch with me, and you can start to think about how you want to develop your own style. Now, going back again to that first question, and when you think about communication, think of it as power. Think of it as how much power you have to deliver. I've seen people, and again, I work with a lot of startups. So when they begin, it's all words. They prep the deck, they prep what they're going to say, but they don't usually think about how they deliver it. When they can marry those two things, if your words align with how you deliver, how you make people feel, that's going to be power. That's where people remember you. That's the trick. And you don't have to be an actor to do this. You don't have to be a singer to do this. It's practice. When I first started presenting a lot, I used to get very nervous as well because I wanted it to be perfect. And through practice, through all these techniques I showed you today, these are things that help me move along and get to a space where I'm presenting all the time. So this is something I want you to think about. I thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope to see you again very soon. Again, my name is Lisa Patti, and I'm collaborating with Imitation. My company is AccentC3, and I hope to see you. And if you'd like to get in touch, just tell me you saw me on the webinar, and we can start a conversation. Thank you.